And amen. You guys can have a seat. Let's give a round of applause to this band. What an excellent job they did today, as always. Phenomenal job. You guys don't know, my name is Pastor James, and I'm the pastor here at Extraordinary Church. And I want to welcome you for being here today. Some of you guys, you weathered the storm to come here today. Some of you guys waited 10 minutes and it was over. So you guys came in when the rain was coming sideways and it felt like you're about to blow away. You could have sat in your car for 5 minutes is what we figured out. But at any rate, you guys are here and we're happy that you're here. And if you're here online, we want to say welcome to you as well. I believe my mom might be watching online right now. And so that's a pretty big deal as she started her chemo treatments this week. And I know that we've all been praying for her. So just want to take a pastor's privilege right now to give a shout out to my mom who's watching right now. So hi, give a round of applause to my mom. She's working hard right now. We started last week by looking at the series called Classic, and the idea is that we all come from different backgrounds when we walk in here this morning. Some of you guys, you might say, this is really one of my very first church experiences. I don't know a whole lot about church. And some of you guys might say, no, you know what, like I was born on a Saturday and I was at church on Sunday. Where's Amari Rose? Amari Rose is pretty much like that, right? She was here somewhere earlier. But that's the way that some people are raised up. And when you're raised up that way, you hear some of these stories that I like to call classic stories. But you hear them over and over again, that sometimes you hear them so much, you become kind of desensitized to them, right? Like the story that we're going to look at today, one of them is the person of Daniel, right? And so you know that if you're a little kid and you heard the story of Daniel, we know that the story of Daniel is always told to kids as Daniel and the Lion's Den, right? And so if you're there, then usually like you're in a circle with your Capri Sun and your little cup of goldfish, and maybe there's like a little stuffed animal lion, right? And that's the whole deal. And everybody stop lying and don't get the lion, right? And there's a whole thing to it. And so now you're out and you're out of the thing. The lion didn't bite you, and that whole deal, right? And it's fine. It's fine. Not wrong. Again, not inaccurate. Just very, very incomplete. Extremely incomplete. Because there's so much more to the person of Daniel than just that. In fact, we talked last week, and we talked about how Isaac was somebody that pointed us to Jesus. The idea is that in this message, what we're going to see is we're going to see that a lot of these Old Testament stories, a lot of these classic stories that we've looked at since we were little kids, that what these stories actually are about is they're actually about Jesus. And so since last week I told you that I was going to trick you until the end, I'm just going to throw it right out there to begin with. Because when you look at the person of Daniel, Daniel had a lot in common with Jesus. Daniel was somebody that was pointing us to Jesus. Daniel and Jesus both led very exemplary lives. Daniel and Jesus were both had false accusations put against them. Daniel and Jesus had these opportunities, these situations that they were in where it was death and life, a life and death situation. Now, the reason that we know that Daniel and Jesus are connected is because in the story that we hear when we were little kids about Daniel in the lion's den, you guys remember when Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, it was something very specific that happened to him. And the specific thing that happened to him was that there was a stone that was rolled over the lion's den. And the idea is that just like Daniel survived the lion in the lion's den as the stone was there, and the stone was then rolled away, and now Daniel was now back as he should have been dead, but now he's alive, the same way that Jesus was in the tomb and the stone was rolled, and 3 days later he came out of that tomb and now he is alive. And so that's what we find a lot in the Old Testament, is that a lot of these guys in the Old Testament are pointing us to Jesus in the New Testament. And so we're going to look at that a little bit today, but I wanted to back up. I wanted to back up and not just tell you about the Capri Sun goldfish version of Daniel, but figure out how he got there. How did he get in that situation to begin with? You know, because if you learn nothing else today, maybe you can learn, hey, how can I make sure nobody ever throws me in a lion den? And if you got that, at least we've accomplished something today, right? So as we back up and we look at Daniel's life and figure out how he got to that situation, what we're going to find in his life is that he used a phrase. And when you have your notes today, your notes are just going to be 3 phrases that we find in the stories of Daniel and his friends. And the phrase that Daniel uses that I think really personifies who he is this 3-word phrase, my God can. My God can. And as you're looking at your notes today, that's the very first note that we have there in our classic series today, looking at Daniel and his friends, is my God can. Because here's what happened in Daniel's life. In Daniel's life, he was a Jewish person by nature. He was one of God's chosen people in the Old Testament, but they were thrown out. They were kicked out. They were exiled. And for Daniel and his buddies, he had to go to Babylon. And Babylon was about 500 miles away. So I did my research today. Poppy, you'd be very proud of me. I did my research to find out that 500 miles away, you could pretty much go to every NFC South city. But why would you want to, right? Like why would you want to, right? But let's imagine this. Arun, you're going to appreciate this. Imagine this, that now you are kicked out of Tampa and you are forced to live in New Orleans. And that's fine. No problem. You can go live in New Orleans. You're okay, right? We have NFL Sunday ticket, right? No big deal. We can still watch our team. It's all good. But what if then, when you moved to New Orleans, it wasn't that you just had to move to New Orleans, but now you had to start being one of them. You know? Like you got to start randomly wearing gold and black. You got to just start shouting, "Who dat? Who dat?" They don't even know who they are. I don't even understand why they shout that. Like, now the food, I might be okay with the food, right? Like you got to eat nothing but New Orleans food. I'd be all right with that. But besides that, I wouldn't like that very much. But this is what happened with Daniel. When Daniel was exiled and had to move 500 miles away, Daniel was told, number one, you're not going to be called Daniel anymore. Your name is going to be called Belshazzar. And Daniel was like, "Oh, no, it ain't. My name's Daniel." And then they said, now that you're living here in our area, you're going to start eating our food. And you're going to eat the food that we give you. And Daniel said, "No, I'm not. That food's not the food that we eat. That's not clean food. We're not going to eat that food." And so here's the biggest thing really about Daniel, is he convinced all of his buddies to become vegetarians. Now, I mean, honestly, like, I'm better with the lions than the vegetarian thing, right? Like, I'm okay with that. But he convinced everybody, hey, don't eat their food. Don't do the things that they say. Don't bow down to the things that this kingdom is trying to tell you to do. Stay strong. Stay strong. And in staying strong, Daniel knows that his life is now in danger because he's not doing the things that the king is very specifically telling him that he has to do. He's got to change his name. He's got to change his ways. He has to eat their food. He has to bow down to the king. And Daniel says, no, and no. And in the midst of all of this, God is watching. God is seeing this, as we talked about last week. How Jehovah Jireh, how God sees, and he will see to it. And in seeing to it, he saw Daniel in his life, and he put him in this situation that was going to help him out. And this is what we're going to start reading here today, this situation that God put Daniel in. Because what they did with Daniel, what God did with Daniel was he tried to rescue Daniel by giving the king, Nebuchadnezzar, a dream. You might have recognized this from the story of Joseph as we looked at it last year. Very similar. Daniel chapter 2, verse 25. Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, "I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means." The king asked Daniel, also called Belshazzar, "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it?" Now let me just stop right there for a second. Basically, here's what's happening. Daniel is called in front of the king, and the king says, "Hey, can you interpret my dream for me?" This is a very specific yes or no question. Yes or no? Can you interpret my dream for me? Yes or no? Now, I don't know if you have those people in your life that when you ask them yes or no questions, they give you every answer except for yes or no, right? I got some of those people in my life, and it's a bit frustrating. Sometimes you ask a yes or no question, just give me a yes or no answer. But in this particular situation, Daniel said, "I'm not going to give you a yes or no answer. I'm going to give you a better answer than that." Basically, the answer that he gave wasn't yes and wasn't no. The answer that he gave was, "My God can." Listen to this. Daniel replied, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the days to come." Now, in this moment, what Daniel did was he went to the king and he said, "No, I don't know anything about interpreting dreams. I don't understand anything that's about to happen, but here's what I do know." 3 words. My God can. Do you imagine the faith that it takes to stand in front of a man that at any moment could say, dead? At any moment, he could say, it's over. At any moment, he could have said, why would you talk to me like that? I am the king, and I asked you a yes or no question, and you're giving me a diatribe. At any moment, this could have ended for Daniel, but he wanted to make sure that if God did something spectacular in his life, that he did not take the credit for it. He wanted to make sure that this king knew that if anything was going to happen, that he had the faith to know that the only reason it happened is because my God can. Now, in your life today, I don't know what you walked in here with today. I don't know what kind of baggage that you're bringing in here today. I don't know if maybe today you're facing what seems like an impossible situation. And if you're facing an impossible situation today, I got 3 words for you. My God can. If you say today, there's things in my family, I just don't know if anything is going to get better in my family, my suggestion for you is to go home today, look at your family, and give them 3 words, my God can. If you're having issues at your job and you're not sure what's going to happen tomorrow when you go and clock in, and you're not sure what it's going to look like, I want you to walk in tomorrow and know that all of this can be fixed. All of this can be restored. All of this can now be God's kingdom because of 3 very simple words, my God can. And this is what Daniel knew in his life. Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, that was good. That was good. That's good. Thank you. I needed to take a drink anyhow. I appreciate that. This is what Daniel had found out in his life. Is that in this situation that you could say, my God can. Now listen, you got to understand the amount of faith that this sentence takes. Right? Because it's easy to say, my God did. That's one sense. It's one thing to say, hey, we got to the other side of this situation, and I can look back now and I can say, my God did. Like, that's one thing. And that's faith. And that's, I'm not downgrading that faith at all. That's one type of faith. But you know the difference between saying, my God did and my God can. It's an enormous difference. But it's not even the end of it. The end of it is that I believe there's a next level to this faith. The next level to this faith says that what happens now is that Daniel, he was promoted. They say, all right, you get your job. You don't have to die. You're all good, right? I'll call you Daniel. You can eat your carrots and your celery. It's all good. You get up here, and Daniel said, all right, that's great. Thank you, but I got one request for you. I got 3 buddies. And I really want you to bring them up with me as well. And now that we have these 3 buddies, what we're going to learn about now is that we're going to learn about how there's one kind of faith that's my God can faith. But then, and this is revolutionary, quite frankly, honestly, if we grab a hold of this next sentence, we grab a hold of this next concept, this is where the faith of us as believers will go from this level to mature faith. Because the next thing that we learn from Daniel's friends is these 3 words, but if not. Man, that changes everything. There's 3 words that say, my God can, but if not. And in the midst of all this, what you find out is that sometimes in life, things just don't go the way that you want them to go. Things just don't go the way that you wish they were going. You know what? It kind of feels like we need a little break here for a minute. It kind of feels like maybe I've been talking a little bit too much. Maybe we need to stop here for a second and think about how sometimes in our lives, I don't know, sometimes in our lives things just don't go exactly the way that we want them to go, right? Sometimes things just keep piling on. And you can say, hey, my God can bring me out of this situation, but he didn't. Something just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And so it reminded me of this time just recently, very, very recently, that I was doing a wedding. And, things didn't go very well. Things didn't go as planned at all. Sometimes you go to a wedding and you know, you're just hanging out and you stay at the reception. You do the whole deal, right? You have a lot of friends here in this room. I performed their weddings. I look around this room. I performed a lot of the weddings in this room. And sometimes you want to hang out. You want to do all that. And then there's sometimes people are like, hey, can you come and do my wedding? Just come in like 10 minutes and then go. And I'm all like, all right, cool. Like, if that's what you want to, I can do that as well. So this one time, it was one of those situations. It was one of those, say, 10 minutes and go situations. They had this spot at this hotel in Tampa, and I was supposed to go to this spot in Tampa. So I got there a little early because I knew how parking was going to be. And so I got there, and John, you wouldn't believe this, but the parking spot was right there in front of the hotel. It was beautiful. It was like, oh, y'all. And I got to pull up right there in that spot. And now I'm like 30 minutes early. And I'm like, all right, this is sweet. So I get all my stuff together. I use this exact binder right here. And I have all my weddings and stuff in here. And so I have this binder, and I got this little music stand that I always take. And I'm walking to the hotel, and I realize, hey, I got time. I forgot my pen. Let me go back and get my pen so I can sign the license later on. And as I go back to get my pen, I got plenty of time, guys. There's nothing to worry about. I go and I grab my pen, and then I don't know what happened next. Like, the next part of it just gets really, really fuzzy as to what happened next. But there was a music stand in my hand, there was this notebook in my hand, and a pen. That's it. That's all I had to balance. That's all I had to balance. And it didn't go very well for me at all. Somehow, I dropped everything. Like, I dropped everything, and everything's right here. This very binder, everything's in this binder, but somehow this binder landed in just a spot like this. That the whole thing pops open. And it was a windy day outside. A very windy day outside. And we're down there in downtown Tampa, and there's some like restaurants right there, like glass facing me. And so you can see the second that I dropped this, there was one guy that came out and helped me, and 3 girls that pulled out their cell phones and started recording me, because now I'm there and I'm trying to grab everything that's flying away. And then the worst thing is like there was some papers that just stuck to the ground. And you're trying to get like paper from concrete, and you're trying to get that out, and I just couldn't do it. And as I'm down here on the ground, I'm trying to make sure it doesn't happen to me again. Let me do it real softly here. As I went down here to the ground to do this very thing, my pants ripped. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. And it was really, really bad. And in fact, I'm pretty sure, I don't know, I haven't tried to look for it, but I'm sure it went viral at some point. And so my pants have ripped now. The papers are flying all over the place. Some nice guy comes and helps me, gets all my papers together. I only need a couple of them for the wedding, so I get those in there, I throw the rest in my car, and now I'm trying to figure out what to do. I said, all right, well, I got a binder, right? Got a binder, and I got a music stand. 10-minute wedding, no problem. I walk in, I found the photographer like this. Hey, nice to meet you. My name is Pastor James, here for the wedding. You're the photographer? Nice to meet you, photographer. We're just going to be right over here in the hotel. We're just going to be right over there. And he said, no, actually, they changed their mind. They want us to take a walk down to the park. I said, man, that's great. Yeah, sure. So I'm walking down to the park, and the bride and the groom come out, and I'm like they really want to hug, and I'm not sure that's right. So I'm trying to hug with a binder and an arm. And at one point we got down, and it was super windy. I know it was super windy because of my circumstance. And so now I'm out there, and the wind's blowing, and I'm walking, and I got this. I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying, got to keep your Google review up. And so trying to make sure you're getting 5 stars. And so I'm walking down here, and I got the whole deal. We get to this spot, super, super windy, and no problem. I got the music stand set up in just the right spot, got everything going. I made sure the music stand just stayed right down here, just the right spot the whole time, right? You guys know my eyesight. I couldn't see very well at all. Most of it was from memory. And so we got it all down here like this, and so they said, all right, well, thank you. You can go now. And I said, well, the only thing I need to do now is I need to sign your license. To which the groom said, oh no, I forgot the license. And I said, all right, no problem. I'll just wait here. The photographer says, hey, while you're waiting here, I'm just going to go ahead and take all these pictures. And I was the rudest guy in the world, because he kept trying to hand me stuff to hold. And he was like, hey, can you hold these flowers for me? And I was like, I can't actually. No, the answer is I can't. Hey, can you hold this? Hey, how about you hold this like this and like this? That way, no, I don't think that's going to work either. I said, you know what? I tell you what I'm going to do. You said that you dropped it in the hotel lobby. Yeah, I think the license is in the hotel lobby. Hey, how about I do that? How about I go back to the hotel lobby and I look for it, and now my pants are all flapping in the wind, and I go back to the hotel lobby and I'm talking to the lady at the front desk, and I'm like, have you seen a license? No, I didn't see any license. And then I go back, I was like, man, I don't know where this thing's at. I'm looking all over, and I went back to the lady. I said, are you sure you didn't see a license? It was in an envelope. She said, oh, somebody dropped an envelope earlier. Come on now, lady. You didn't think that maybe that was the license I was talking about? And so we finally got the whole thing going. We got the whole thing signed. And the thing that I remembered in that moment was that at some point in my life, I knew I was going to tell that story right here on this stage to let you know that sometimes in life, things just keep getting worse. Sometimes you think they're going to get better, and then they get a little bit worse. Sometimes you think things are going to be okay. You got all the kids all dressed and ready to go, and the van doesn't start. Sometimes, doesn't that just happen? Sometimes, man, you had the nicest hair day. Heather's hair is so nice and beautiful and curly today, and don't you know it's raining, right? Like sometimes you think everything is going to work out just fine, and yet something bad happens, and then the next thing happens, and the next thing happens, and the next thing happens. And maybe some of you guys are walking in here today, and you're in that situation where you know in faith, you know beyond the shadow of a doubt that God can take you out of that situation, but He hasn't. He hasn't. Every time you think God's going to take you out of a situation, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and it snowballs and it snowballs and it snowballs. And here's what I want to let you know, is that there's a time in your life when your faith will become so mature that you will know that even in those times when things keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse, that you still worship the Most High God. There's a time in your life where you realize that there's one stage of faith that says, my God can. And there's another stage of faith that says, but if not, I will still worship my God. My God can heal disease. But if not, He's still God. My God can help me in my workplace. But if not, I still worship Him. This is the lesson that we've learned from Daniel and his friends. Here's what happened with his friends. In fact, you might know his friends. If you guys have been raised in church for a long time, you might know his friends. In fact, you know what, Ben? We could put his friends up on the screen here. You guys know these three guys here? If you guys were raised in church, you guys know who's up there on the screen. That's right. Now some of you guys will say that's the VeggieTales, and that's true. That's fine. That's like maybe you started going to church in first grade, right? That's good. Or maybe you're a little bit older than VeggieTales. And some of you guys are like, no, that's definitely VeggieTales. And some of you guys were specific. The second that went up on the screen, you go to the next slide. The second that went up on the screen, you guys know that's the story of Rack, Shack, and Benny. Some of you guys knew that right off the bat, didn't you? I heard it. I heard some of you guys say, right? In fact, Miss Marsha, didn't you say Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? These are the three friends that Daniel had right here. And this is a lot of the times what we heard about this story. What we hear about this story is there's these three friends, and the king Nebuchadnezzar wants you to bow down and worship this big chocolate bunny. Now listen, you can hear that story and you can understand why kids would understand that. You can understand why like 20, 30 years later, some of you guys still remember that. We get it. I understand. That's beautiful. I love the fact that that's how you learned it growing up. But there's so much more to it than that. There's so much more to it than that I believe that the story of Rack, Shack, and Benny is actually the story of but if not faith. These are three people that said, I do believe that God can rescue me, but if not, nothing changes. You go to the next slide so I can keep talking. And this is the story that we have of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that after this whole situation came through, and now Daniel said, I want my three buddies. I want my three buddies, Rack, Shack, and Benny. I want them to be promoted. I want them to be in a nice spot. Then all of a sudden they were in a nice spot, but not quite with Daniel, so things were happening over here in their area. And in their area, the King Nebuchadnezzar said, I'm making this big statue, this big golden statue, and it's going to be like as tall as like a 9-story building. And this 9-story building statue, what happens is when you hear the music play, when the speaker kicks in, I want you guys to all bow down and worship that statue. And just picture this in your mind. Picture right now, this entire room is filled with people. Every seat is filled. And they said, all right, what's going to happen now is you guys are all stand up. The music's going to play. When the music plays, all of you bow down and worship this idol. And everybody did it. Everybody did it. Except for 3 guys. Can you imagine being one of those 3 guys? You imagine standing up and being like, oh boy, this is not going to be good. This is not going to end well for us. Imagine being one of those 3 guys and now you're getting called in the principal's office. You can call it in the principal's office, and this is where we pick up the story, and this is where we find this but if not faith that they had, because these 3 guys, Rack, Shack, and Benny, they said there's no way that we're going to bow down and worship that. There's no way that's right. And here's what they said. Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, little g, or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the song of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe." Hey Jacob, how come we didn't have all those instruments today? That would have been really cool. "And all kinds of music. If you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God, little g, will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But if not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. But if not." Imagine the faith that it took these 3 men to stand up in front of all of these people and say, "I don't care what everybody else is doing. I know what's right, and this isn't right." Can you imagine what it took for these 3 guys to stand before the king and say, "King, you can throw me into a furnace if you want. My God can save me from that furnace. But if not, nothing changes." Nothing changes. You know, like we hear these stories and we watch the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and we teach this to our kids about how they got in the furnace and they survived in the furnace, and we say, you know what, God can rescue you from the fire. God can pull you through, but you know what, guys? He doesn't always do it. He doesn't always do it. We know that there's missionaries all over the world that die on a daily basis. I can imagine that at some point they said, my God can rescue me from this. But if not, nothing changes. I keep worshiping one true God. And where you're at today, whatever you came in here with today, just know that God can rescue you. God can heal you. God can restore you. God can fix what is broken. But if not, you still worship the one true God. You still stand firm on your convictions. You do not compromise. You do not bow down to what the world says to bow down to. You stand strong and you say, I don't care what the world does around me. I serve the one true God, and He can restore me. He can heal me. He can fix the brokenhearted. But if not, I will not bow down. I will stay strong and I will worship God. You know, this story of Rack, Shack, and Benny, started thinking about like what happens a lot of times in our lives is that we can have faith. We can have faith in the situation that we're in, right? Like think about this morning when you woke up. You woke up and you had a house. You had access to breakfast. You had a car. You're able to come in here. We're literally in a public school right now. We're literally in a public school having church right now. You know, like there's a lot of great, amazing blessings that we have. And so we can walk in here and we can say, yeah, we have faith in God. Yeah, man, God our Father, God the Son, man, we praise Him for sure. But the question though is, what happens if all of that is taken away? If all of that is taken away, does your faith still stand strong? See, I think what happens a lot of times, is that we have faith, but the faith that we have is based on what God can do for us and not based on who He is. And there comes a time in our life when we mature as a believer and we say, it doesn't matter the things that God does for me, if He does them or if He doesn't do them, I worship God because He is God and He's deserving of being worshiped. And so as you look at this story, you look at Rak, Shaq, and Benny, there's this spot where when we started with Daniel, he started the whole thing. He kicked off the whole thing and he said, my God can. My God can tell you what dreams you have. My God can do whatever He wants to do. I'm not going to take credit for it. My God can. And now Shaq, Rak, and Benny, they came through and they said, you know what? Me too. Right? My buddy Daniel, he said it. I'll say it too. My God can. Oh, King Nebuchadnezzar, no, my God can rescue me from this. My God can. If you throw me in the fire, my God can. It's all good. But if not, nothing changes. I'm not going to bow down. And then you get to the third level. You get to the third thing that I want you to write down today. The third thing that I want you to write down today is that the phrase that says that my God can, but if not. And then what we find when Shaq, Rak, and Benny were in this fire, my God sent. S-E-N-T. My God sent. And you guys know what happened when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in the fire. You know what? It's such good stuff that I just want to read it for you. Daniel chapter 3, verse 24. I love this part. It says, then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked the advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? And they replied, certainly, Your Majesty. And he said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like the Son of God. And Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, capital G, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched. Heather, you're going to like this part. And there was no smell of fire on them. Then King Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God, capital G, of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent His angel and rescued His servants. They trusted in Him and defied the king's commands and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any God except for the one true God. My goodness, what amazing verses. What amazing verses. And what we find in these verses is that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were thrown into the fire. And he said, aren't there 3 people in the fire? I know there's 3. I saw 3 in there. I saw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I saw Rak, Shaq, and Benny. They were thrown into that fire. Why is there 4 people in there? Number 1, why is there 3 people in there? They should have died immediately. And now there's 4? I don't understand what's happening. And what I know, and what I hope you know that I'm about to say, is that when they were in that fire, when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in that fire, they were not alone. God saw them. God saw them in that fire, and my God sent His Son, Jesus, to be in that fire with them. My God sent a Christophany of Jesus, the pre-incarnate Christ, walking around in that fire. And I don't know what you think, Jacob, but I think they were singing, I thank God. I think right in the midst of that, they were jamming, they were dancing, they were doing all the things that we're not supposed to do exactly in church. But they were right there in the middle of that fire, and Jesus was there with them. And they said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, what's going on? And they said, we're all good in here, buddy. We're just having a nice little party. Come on out. I will worship the one true God. And in your life, what's going to happen so many times is you're going to go through the fires of life. You're going to go through difficulties. It's going to feel as though it's one thing after another, after another, after another, after another. And you could say, hey, my God can rescue me from this. But if not, I can have faith right here in the midst of the fire because my God sent His Son Jesus to be in that fire with me. And now I know that I will never, ever be alone. And now that we know that my God sent, and my God sent His Son Jesus, and now that we know that in my belief system, in my beliefs as a Christophany, I believe in a pre-incarnate Christ showing up in the Old Testament, and I believe with all my heart beyond the shadow of a doubt that Jesus was there. That Jesus was just chilling in that fire saying, hey, Shadrach and Benny, you might not know my name yet, but they're going to celebrate me. I'm just telling you, there's going to be this thing called Christmas. It's going to blow your mind, guys. It's going to be amazing. But then there's going to be this thing called Easter. And man, it's even so much better. There's going to be these times where people think they can keep me down. They ain't going to do it. They're going to put me in a tomb and put a little stone over it, like they did Daniel, your buddy Daniel in the lion's den, but they ain't going to keep me down. You see, what happens is we tell the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and we say, hey, this is where we should end the message. We should end the message with, when you go through the fires of life, Jesus is there with you. And man, that's a good ending. Miss Teresa, I think we would agree, that's a good ending, right? But again, it's still just incomplete. You see, because what happens when you look at these stories, when you look at the stories in the Old Testament, is there's still what's called a lower story and an upper story. And the lower story says that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego survived the fire because Jesus was there with them. And man, that's a cool story. And so now I can come here, I can say, hey, you know what? If you're having troubles at work, it's cool. Jesus is there with you in the fire. If you're having trouble with your family, it's cool. Jesus is there with you in the fire. But what I believe this story is actually trying to tell us is that there's a lot of things that's even more important than our jobs, our houses, and quite frankly, even our families. I think really what the story is lending itself to is the story is trying to tell us who we are. And really the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it's a story about our sin. It's a story about our sin. It's a story about how the sin of our lives is eating us up. All right, if you don't believe me, then think about this. Scholars say that you can't tell the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego without telling the story of Moses rescuing the Egyptians, rescuing the Israelites from the Egyptians. Now, Pastor Fields is going to, in a few weeks, he's going to give the story of Moses right up here and connect it to Jesus in a few weeks. I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert ahead of time. I'm going to give you a little trailer. The trailer says that Moses went and rescued the Israelites from the Egyptian slavery. And do you know that in the Old Testament that the land of Egypt has a nickname? You might know what it is? It's called the blazing furnace. The nickname of Egypt in the Old Testament is the blazing furnace, in the same way that Moses rescued the Israelites from the blazing furnace is the same way that Jesus rescued Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the blazing furnace. And it's the same way that very same Jesus rescues each and every one of you and me from the blazing furnace of our sin. And he says, I will rescue you from your sin because you are in bondage, in slavery to the sin that you have. The Bible says in Romans 6:23 that the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is Christ Jesus our Lord. And I believe the upper story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it tells us that without Jesus, we have nothing. Without Jesus, the best day that we can ever have here on earth. Without Jesus, your best day ever here on earth will also be your best day ever, period. But with Jesus, even your best day here on earth will be your worst day compared to what it's going to be like in heaven. And when you look at the world that we live in, you look at everything around us, I don't think it's a surprise. But I believe that blazing furnace, the book of Daniel, and the blazing furnace that's described in Egypt in the book of Exodus, I believe that blazing furnace describes the world that we live in. And one day we're going to be rescued from that blazing furnace if we put our trust in Jesus. And if you don't, that's it. This is why I believe that John chapter 3, verse 16. I know John Kettering said his favorite verse is John 3:17. So let me back up one more verse and say that John 3:16, the reason it's so important is because it says, "For God so loved the world that He sent." My God sent His only Son, Jesus, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. I serve a God that can heal. I serve a God that can restore. I serve a God that can perform miracles, and I promise you, I've seen it happen. I've seen God restore families. I've seen God restore health. I've seen God restore jobs. I've seen God restore emotions. I've seen God restore mental illness. I've seen God restore over and over again. So I know with certainty that I can say, my God can. But I also know there's a lot of times that I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed. And I had to say, my God can. But if not, I have to trust in who He is. I have to trust that He is still God and He is still worthy of my praise. And the only reason I can have that kind of faith is because my God sent. My God sent His Son into this world to make sure that we know that we're not alone and that one day we will be with Him in heaven. So no matter what you go through here on earth, just know that the best is yet to come. Thank you guys so much for your attention today. If you guys please have a word of prayer with me. Dear God, we love You so much, and we thank You, God, for this day. Thank You, Lord, for the amazing people that are here today and the attention that they're paying. God, I thank You that we know that we serve a God that can. We know that You can restore, You can heal, You can fix the brokenhearted. God, allow me to have the faith that says, but if not, I still worship You, Lord. But if not, I still sing Your praises. But if not, I will not bow down to what this world says. So God, I pray for anybody in this room today. Anybody here today that can hear my voice, anybody here today that knows that when it comes to the end, that they haven't accepted Jesus. I pray that if anybody in this room today, you say, I don't know if I've accepted Jesus, I pray right now, God, that You will knock on their hearts. I pray right now, God, that you will let them know that You are here. God, there's a giant word Jesus right here on stage, so we know they've got a sign. And I pray, God, that You will put that in their hearts. Know that today will be the day that they can accept You, Lord. God, I pray for anybody else in here today, God, that just comes with baggage, that feels like they've been in the fire, that feels like it's one thing after another, after another, after another. I pray, God, that for them today, Lord, that You will bring them restoration, that You will let them know that even if they're in a but-if-not situation, that they are not alone, that You are with them through this fire. Lord, we love You so much. It's in Your mighty, amazing name that we pray. Amen. Guys, at this time,